As I was trying to think about the challenge as I understood it for the city of Edmonton, I was thinking about it from that lens. There's often three different policy design choices that I'd look at. The first one is depth or breadth. So depth is often when you've got a smaller group of people, but they're coming together for a long time. A broader range engagement, online engagements often allow us to get out to a whole lot more people. Level of intensity. How intense are the discussions? How complex is the issue? So got a lot of scientific and technical information about it that people have to understand. And then what I call the policy to action continuum. So are we really trying to get citizens' perspectives and values to really input into policy and have an impact on policy? Or are we at the other end of continuum where we're really hoping it's going to actually help to do some social mobilization, that type of thing? So it's a continuum there, not an either or. And so much of what you decide to do in terms of design choices is based on the goal of engagement. I'm going to go through three examples pretty quickly. One that I'm working with right now, along with Miriam Wyman, who's also here today, is the Ontario Citizens Council. This is a legislated council that was established by the Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, established by the minister, and it actually reports to the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Ontario Public Drug Program. Its goal is to bring citizens' perspectives and values into those policies and program decisions. And it was established about 2 years ago through a process of open recruitment via media. So people were informed they could apply, they sent in an application process, and there was a selection process that went on and came up with 25 people. They serve 2-year staggered terms, and they meet 2 to 3 times a year, 2.5 days per session, and each session is on a particular topic. So for example, one of the ones we looked at was, should the Ontario Public Drug Program fund drugs for rare diseases? These drugs are often very expensive, so it would take a substantial portion of the drug program to be able to do that. So very value-laden issues, but also issues that have a scientific and technical base. Because of the kind of issues they deal with, the first session was actually an orientation session, 2.5 days, to build their capacity to deal with the kinds of technical and complex issues they needed to deal with. So this is an example of a high-depth, intense citizen deliberation targeted directly at policy. Feeds right into the policy process, and the ADM actually has to report back to the council at each of their meetings about what's happened with their recommendations and advice and where it's gone. Another one that we've done quite a lot of in Canada is what we call a series of citizen dialogues on particular issues. They often roll out across the country in a region or in a municipality. There's often 5 to 10 sessions, different people at each session. They're usually randomly selected, and sometimes that's complemented by particular recruitment out of hard-to-reach groups. And they use similar processes and materials so that you can get comparability of results across the sessions. They focus on a key societal issue. Again, some of them are quite complex. Often they'll bring, after all the citizen sessions, they'll bring together representatives of those sessions together into a final session to really look at what's the common ground across the sessions and where has there been areas of divergence. It's particularly important in terms of geographical difference if you're looking at a national policy. And those sessions are often higher profile. They're looking for some media outreach. The one we did in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Premier was at with senior ministers. So they'll often have a high profile, which helps to reach out to broader people. So they're a mix of depth and breadth. They're intense deliberation, but quite time limited, policy focused, but some attention to action or capacity building. In the Newfoundland one, we actually trained a number of young people to actually be the facilitators of the different sessions. The final one is what I've called community conversations, community dialogues, lots of different terms for these things. But they're things where you're going into a community, you're hosting the event, they're open to all, but they're happening at the community level. So you're often dealing with local issues or larger issues with important local impact. They're multi-interest, so you're bringing together whoever wants to come out of the community. They might be affiliated citizens. By that I mean citizens that are part of stakeholder groups or interest groups, or they might be totally unaffiliated, coming without any other agenda than their own interest as a citizen. Different types and levels of knowledge, varied perspectives, so the process has to be able to adapt to that as well. They are designed and facilitated dialogue sessions, so they're not like a town hall. They are still a deliberative process. An example was one we did for the province of BC, where we actually did community dialogues around fishing issues, and many of them actually were with First Nations communities and went into First Nations communities to get their input. Example of good breath, less intense, some policy impact depending on who the host is and whether there's a direct channel into the policymakers, and action possibilities coming out of that. So last slide, just to give you a bit of an overview in terms of how those three examples of deliberative processes map out against those design features. So you've got the Citizen Council, the one that I talked about at the beginning, high depth, very intense process, direct feed into policy, low on action. Action is not a component of what's intended to happen coming out of that Citizen Council, except at the level of the bureaucracy has to take action. Citizen dialogues, a little bit more mixed, some breadth, a little bit more breadth, some intensity, can have a feed into policy, and can have action implications as well. And then the community conversations, less depth, more breadth, and lead more into the action possibility. As a number of the other presenters said, of course, these can be combined in lots of different interesting ways. They don't have to be done as just standalones. The total design, the total public engagement process might involve a variety of these kinds of approaches.